Hey, this is Bond Diesel bringing you the third Underground Intel Insights. This time we'll be hearing from Private Ellis Green, who is a LMB soldier that is part of a group that has gone underground and is trying to discover some things. So go ahead and listen, and then we will discuss afterwards.
I don't like the way things are going lately. We've lost a lot of guys. I don't see a lot of gains. And I sure as hell don't see things going back to the way that they used to be. Some of these guys are hung up on power, on remaking the state in their image. That's cool. I can see why they're into that. But I got into this for the money. Everything else will follow. We have to stay focused. The way I see it, the problem right now is that no one is approaching our situation like a good businessman would. And if no one else is going to take the initiative, then I will. We're hearing some rumors that civvies have found a way out of the city. Down here. Yeah, they got tunnels galore under the city. Sewers, cabling, subways. I haven't seen any maps, but it's not too far-fetched. Obviously, some of the subway lines went through, but they shut those things down when they got serious about a quarantine. Still, there's plenty of other options to find an escape route, and I can see that being a holy grail for some of these desperate fucks who got nothing left to live for. But the thing is, if that's true, it'll be very bad for business. Nobody gets a free ride out of town, not as long as we're around. We've got the infrastructure in place to give people the golden ticket, a ride out of Manhattan. We got helicopters, and we got guns to shoot down anybody who gets in our way. But we only give rides to VIPs who have the cash required, not just anybody. This is not a charity operation. Payment must be in assets, not money. Money's never been worth the paper it's printed on, and now it's really not good for much more than lining bird cages. More than some of those dead presidents deserve anyway. If there's a way out of Manhattan down here, if that's really true and word gets around, we worked hard to have a monopoly, and it's going to stay that way. So I've decided to investigate, brainstorm some solutions, make some proposals, straight up entrepreneurial problem solving, responding quickly to change, 24/7. Gotta stay with the times. Military tactics work to a certain extent. And we do that well, and our org may be made up of military guys, but we didn't start out as a militia. We started out as a business, filling a niche, doing the dirty jobs the U.S. government didn't have the guts to do. I'm just saying, let's not forget our roots. Let's remember the other part of what we do well. Make money. And let's focus on strategies to achieve that goal, like any good manager would. To put it succinctly, fear sells. It makes sense for us to engage in sending the message, this island is lethal. Only the Last Man Battalion has the skills, equipment, and tactics to deal with the situation, to secure any future of any sort. That's our message. That's the key to profit. So we need to find better ways of delivering on that message. Some advertising. I did a little recon on my own today. Found just what I expected. A little band of people with flashlights and backpacks and cute little coats and an NYC subway map. Little twerps needed a lesson in survival, and I gave it to them by showing they have failed to survive. And I took my time about it too. Certain skill sets you have to practice, use it or lose it. Left the bodies down there to send a clear message. The LMB is your only option. I've been considering the options, and I think we have to go bigger here. To crush the competition, we have to literally crush the competition. If there are tunnels out of Manhattan, and there are people who know how to navigate these tunnels, and if they are getting people out of Manhattan via those tunnels, well, it doesn't matter if they're doing it for love or money. It has to stop. Sure, we can discourage the service by killing the competitors. We can leave piles of dead bodies. We can even mutilate those dead bodies to really send a message. But as long as those tunnels still exist, we have a problem. I'm proposing we begin a strategic bombing of tunnels in order to close off any potential means of escape for our competitors and our potential customers. Eliminate not only our competitors, but also any reason to compete. If there aren't any other ways off the island, there's no question where to turn. It's the only smart thing to do. And after the tunnels, the bridges. Gotta think big. No pain, no gain. Gonna present it tonight. Think this will be my chance to move up in this organization. Finally. Told the so-called leadership about my plan, and they had the nerve to tell me to my face that it was ill-advised and lacked foresight. Those sons of bitches can't see vision when it slaps them across the face. Those pussies think we'll get trapped here if we take out the bridges and the tunnels. They're thinking about power, not money, not opportunity. Misplaced priorities. They had the nerve to laugh in my face. Well, it got me thinking. Maybe it's time to move on. Find some people with the right frame of mind. And if the LMB won't see the light, well, maybe it's time for them to go down.
So this one's really interesting because I think it gives some pretty good background on the LMB fairly quickly, where he talks about how before all this happened, they weren't a militia group necessarily. They were more a contractor for hire. You know, the government used them. I'm under the impression that in the lore of the story, they were being used by basically wealthy people to protect businesses and property and things like that. And then when stuff really went down, they recognized the opportunity they had and expanded on it. What I think is kind of cool is how he talks about how the whole point, getting back to their roots and getting back to making money and not worrying as much about power and oppressing, and controlling the city, but utilizing the situation the best they can to profit and to set themselves up well. What I think is interesting about that is that it's a very short-sighted view, and it's, in his whole opinion, is that what he's doing is setting himself up for the long run. But it kind of makes you wonder, well, this has to mean that he doesn't think that any type of normal is ever going to come back, because if it did, everything that he and his group would be doing would just be setting themselves up for failure and prosecution and punishment from whatever powers that be come back. I also think this is interesting. This is our first inclination that there may be a way off the island that isn't found yet or isn't controlled. The impression I've always been given is that the bridges have been shut down, and basically the JTF or whatever military or government powers that be have completed this quarantine on Manhattan, and you can't leave Manhattan. Like, you just can't. You can't even go to the fences and ask for help. They'll just turn you back at this point. So I think that's kind of interesting, because if you remember in the West Side Piers, Keener talks about being able to get off the island, and all it takes is one person, one bribe, one person to let someone slip through. And this suggests that there's tunnels or subways or even cableways, which people don't realize in these really big cities. You have literally there's tunnels just for utilities, electrical lines, internet lines, all kinds of things like that that have to exist because the amount of them is so large in these extremely high populated areas. So there's any number of ways that people could probably get from Manhattan to the outside world, but that's obviously what this guy wants to prevent. It's really interesting that towards the end, you can tell he thinks, he's finding civilians, murdering them, maiming their bodies, and setting them up as examples for other people that may be trying to go down there. He even proposes blowing up tunnels and then bridges, he talks about, to the point of, I assume, wanting to blow up bridges off the island. And I think it's really interesting because in his brain, he's saying we need to do this to make money or to profit in some capacity in the long run. But I don't think that's also still not taking into account that a larger power may come back at some point than themselves, and this will all be for naught. That he thinks everything the LMB is doing is short-sighted, when, you know, at least from my perspective, everything he's thinking is extremely short-sighted. And then, you know, at the end, there's kind of this hint that he proposes all these ideas to the leadership, thinking that he may even get promoted, and then he gets laughed at. And they call his ideas ill-advised and lacking foresight, which is exactly the opposite of what he thinks he's proposing. And even to the point where at the very end, he suggests that maybe he needs to find people who think more like him. So this is one of the first examples, or maybe the only example we get from LMB soldiers, even though we do get some hint of it in the West Side Piers with those events, that this guy's straight up saying, I want to start my own group or find people more like me and who think like me. Now, does this mean that in future content or a sequel of this game that there's going to be some offshoot of the LMB? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe this story will be forgotten in the history of the lore of this game. I'm not sure. But I do think it's interesting that just like in the Rikers groups, or just like in, actually I wouldn't say the Cleaners seem to have a pretty straight and concise direction of where they all are headed. But then also even in the Division and the Shade agents, when you talk about the Rogues, they were also a group that didn't think the leadership was doing things right, so they decided to do it themselves. So I think it's interesting finding the similar sentiment in the LMB organization, which, you know, very well could have impacts on the future of this game as we know it. So that's what I have for this video. If you liked what you saw, please drop a like on the video, comment down below with suggestions or your own ideas. Make sure to check me out on Twitter and Twitch. Those links are down below in the description. And until the next one,